Friends are the only relationship that you have that isn't contractually obligated to you. Have you thought about that? A spouse, you signed a wedding contract. An employer, you signed a contract. Even there's like social contracts, even like at a grocery store. It's not like your sales clerk could leave the conversation if he or she was bored. So there's a real value in a friendship that you don't have in other relationships, because a friend is someone who chooses to be around you. Maybe that friend is working 40-hour weeks and has a family and has lots of obligations, but they choose to spend their very limited free time with you voluntarily. And so there's something like really enriching about a good friendship in your life, because it's nice to know that there's someone in the world that would actually prefer to be around you. And there's no bribe or pay included in forcing that. It's just, they just genuinely want to be in your presence. And it's hard. It's hard to make friends as an adult. Because in a perfect world, your friends in kindergarten would be your friends in middle school, and then your friends in middle school would be your friends in high school, and then you go to college together and dorm together, and then you'd all meet your partners and raise kids, and all your friends would be in Little League, together. It's like, that doesn't work. That doesn't happen, because we live in kind of a mobile society where people go to school in different states, and then they take jobs in different states, and so most of us are forced to learn how to make friendships as kind of a post-college adult. And it's not obvious how to do that. It's not simple. It's not like we had all the, in college there was all the recreational activities and all the student events, and you could just go to the bar until 2 a.m. But I don't know, you're old now. You have a career. I don't know, maybe you have kids. It's like, how do you make a friendship with somebody when you have such limited time and maybe not all the same kinds of spaces? So that's kind of what I want to talk about today, is how to do that. And maybe some overarching principles about how to begin a friendship that might be helpful, as an adult. So here's maybe the common theme that we're going to be talking about. The overarching theme is friendship is built on common interest and really common ground, holistically. And the more common ground that you hold with someone, maybe the richer or the more enduring the friendship will be. If you have the same sense of humor, if you have maybe some of the same hobbies, and that's, especially initially, that's really important, but some of the same values, whether that's like religious or political, or, the same direction that your life is headed. You have a similarity in how you see the world and how you operate in the world as a person. The more common ground you have, the more long-lasting the friendship will be. And so the question then becomes, like, how do you find people that you have that commonality with, that you have that common ground with, so that you can have this rich friendship that is really necessary to living a flourishing life? And, I want to talk about a dynamic today that I think every introvert I've ever talked to hates this, and it doesn't get a lot of good press ever. It's always something kind of pejorative, but there's something important to it. So I want to break it down maybe piece by piece psychologically to make a case for the utility of small talk. I know I probably just lost a few of you, but there's something so important about small talk that is, I think, so overlooked, and people just want to skip that, or they feel awkward with that, and so and I think unfortunately that actually limits your ability to meet new people and to find good friends as if you're bad at small talk. And the reason small talk is important is because it starts, and I'll make a case for this, when you meet somebody, you start really at a general level of just interests and hobbies and things that you just find remotely interesting, and then you move up maybe progressively into more vulnerable or more deep or substantive topics. And it's built that way on purpose, because, well, here's the thing, when you feel awkward socially, that's usually one of two things. One, awkwardness is the inability to establish common ground, or to like pushing and operating towards somebody as if you have common ground when you don't. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that I really love the show The Office, TV show. It's super awkward and funny, and so let's say like we're acquaintances and we're having, maybe there's like a work party or something, and we're having a conversation, over some fruit punch, and I make like an Office reference. I say something like parkour. If you've watched The Office, if you've, seen that show, and then you might laugh at that joke, and we would chuckle, and that would be a good old thing. But let's say you haven't seen that TV show. You would just look at me like, parkour, what? And then let's say I operate towards you as if we have common ground, and I keep going, or I try to explain the TV episode and why it's funny. That would be super awkward. It's not necessarily awkward to discover that you don't have common ground, because I could ask, hey, do you have any TV shows that you like watch TV? And then you could say, oh no, I read mostly. I don't watch a lot of TV. And then we can move on to a different topic of conversation. That's not awkward. But if you said, oh no, I read books, and then I'm like, oh well, you got to see this TV show. The Office is just hilarious. Then that would be awkward, because I'm operating towards you as if we have common ground, as if we have a common interest, when you don't. And that's really important to know. That's information about the other person that's crucial, because really what we're trying to get down to is, do you have an awareness of me? And these little small, minute social exchanges kind of function as boundaries. And so if I tell you, I'm more into reading books, I don't really watch a lot of TV, and then you cross that boundary and still talk to me about TV for the next 20 minutes, I'm like, if you can't respect even that pretty benign social boundary, how are you going to react to my more important boundaries? How are you going to react to the parts where I really don't need you to intrude? If you don't have an awareness of me, if you can't see that that's not a conversation I'm very interested in, how are you going to have an awareness of me when it really counts? When I'm in pain, or when I need you, or when I'm struggling, or when I have a deep existential question that I'm trying to ponder, you don't have an awareness of me in the small things, that means you probably won't have an awareness of me in the big things. And so small talk is really a series of these social tests that really are trying to answer the question, can I trust you? And that's why it's drastically important. It's important that you get good at it. It's important that you don't look at it in a negative light, because it's not obvious that you can just skip the small talk and go right to meaningful things. And because people who just kind of resist the small talk and go right to the deep right away, it's usually kind of these short-lived, really intense kind of friendships that might even cross some weird boundaries and get into codependent, really weird things. You've seen that. You've seen people that just get really involved and kind of overly attached to people. It's because there wasn't likely just this infrastructure of noticing, do you have an awareness of me? Can you respect my boundaries? Do we have common ground? And then only once we establish that in the more general things, then we can move to the more specific things. So, for me, it's often so I have steak nights at my house pretty often. I love barbecue and steak, and so if I have an acquaintance or someone I'm kind of getting to know, or I'll invite him to one of my steak nights, and that's kind of the first test, right? It's okay, do we have just the same food in mind? Do we like the same things? And so I'm like, okay, cool. So maybe they like steak, or maybe they like whiskey or something. So they'll come over and we'll have a dram and a steak, and we'll talk. And then maybe we have a conversation after that. And we're just oh, what do you do for work? And that maybe they are a school teacher, and then I say, oh yeah, I'm a psychotherapist, and then maybe we have conversation about how working with kids and what it's like trying to motivate kids and help kids accomplish their schoolwork during COVID, and that's a topic that's really on my mind. That's, I'm sure, a topic that's on their mind, and so we talk about that a little bit more, and then progressively it can get to more and more vulnerable topics and more topics of substance, but not if the more mundane topics don't get laid down first. So as you're thinking about, well, how do I, make friends as an adult, it starts by just finding mundane things that you're interested in, this kind of loose hobbies, and finding a group that also has that hobby, and then maybe going through and making connections with several people in that group, and you're looking for people who have more common ground than just that one thing. So Facebook is a great place to find groups, for that kind of stuff. I joined a Facebook group that was on tropical plants, and they did a plant trade. And so we all met at the park, 40 people all met at the park, and we're trading rare tropical plants. And then you have conversations with people, and you see okay, do we have more in common than just plants? Maybe, maybe not. And so you have those kind of conversations. Like I said, the steak nights, what else? I've joined different music groups over time. So going to church and volunteering at church in different departments, that's a good thing that I've done, where I've met good friends. It's kind of going to those larger social groups, looking for people with common ground, and then finding more and more things that the friendship can kind of be about as you get to more substantive matters. So unfortunately, that's the only way to do it too. I don't have enough time maybe in this post to go into like stuff around social anxiety. Maybe that'd be a good post all on its own, but small talk is important. That's how you make friendships, is by starting broad and then moving to more substantive topics. So those are my thoughts today. Those are my thoughts for a Friday morning. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you next week.